dia. Desculpe, não falo português. So I'm going to be talking English. I'm very sorry. But hopefully there's some translation happening in the back. And I'll try and talk slowly. I'm here to talk about new technological frontiers in philanthropy. But before I do that, maybe I should talk a little bit about who I am and where I'm from. So my name is Michael Mapstone. I'm the Director of International at Charities Aid Foundation. And I'm responsible for leading the Charities Aid Foundation Global Alliance. And Aegis is our valued partner representing CAF here in Brazil. And it's great to be here at the forum. CAF supports philanthropy in all its forms and strengthens civil society around the world. The way we do this really is about connecting philanthropists, whether they're wealthy individuals, foundations, companies, or just a member of the public, to social organizations that they want to support. We sit in the middle and try and help that donation of money or time happen efficiently and effectively. There's some numbers on the slide there. I'll just talk about what they are. In the UK, we're a civil society organisation. We're a charity, but we're a little bit different. We own a bank, which is there to provide financial services to charities in the UK, but also to the donor community. We hold around $2.5 billion of donor and charity money, so it's what we have under management. Last year, we distributed about $600 million to 87,000 charities in 125 countries around the world. And we've been doing this for about 90 years. So we're quite a big player in terms of helping philanthropy happen. We also do a lot of research, a lot of thinking, coming up with ideas about what the future holds for philanthropy and civil society, not just in the UK, but all around the world. And recently we've been doing a lot of work thinking about blockchain and artificial intelligence and what the impact these technologies will have on philanthropy and civil society. I'm going to talk through some of that today. Is anybody familiar with blockchain? Good. We'll be coming to you to ask questions later. And is anybody familiar with artificial intelligence or using artificial intelligence? Excellent. This is quite worrying for me, which you'll find out why in a minute. What I'm going to do is talk about what it is, for those that don't know. Those that do know, please help correct me. I'm going to talk about how it works, but not at a very detailed level, because it's a really geeky subject. I'm going to talk about it quite high level. And I'm going to talk about why it matters, what's so important, why philanthropy and civil society need to be thinking about blockchain and artificial intelligence, and society more generally. And then talk about the opportunities and challenges. Okay, so here we go. First of all, a warning. I am not a technological expert. I find it really difficult to even use my iPhone. I have to ask my children to help me. So I'm not going to talk a lot about the details here. What I am kind of is an expert in philanthropy and civil society, and I'm going to be talking about the context of blockchain and artificial intelligence, about philanthropy and civil society. So what is blockchain? In its most simple form, it's a distributed public ledger, or in my mind, a filing system. It's a record system. It helps keeps records of, I suppose the most popular and well-known example is Bitcoin blockchain, which records transactions between users of that cryptocurrency, but the applications of blockchain go much farther than money and Bitcoin. How does it work? I think I'm going to keep this really, really simple because I find it really, really confusing. The basic idea is that each block of the blockchain is a snapshot of a whole system at any given moment in time. Users, me, you, anybody, help build new blocks by contributing processing capacity to calculate certain cryptographic functions, which are known as hashes. Complicated? Confused? Yeah, good, okay. Right. Every time a new block is created, the hash, or a little bit of the block before, helps create the new block. So every block is dependent on the one before it. The easiest way in my mind to think about this is a tower, a building block. Every time you add a block to the blockchain, you're going up, though the blockchain kind of goes across, which is a bit complicated. If you take one out, the whole thing falls down. So every block of the tower is dependent on the one before it, and especially at the one at the bottom. The actual technology and technicalities of cryptographic mining and hash functions and Merkle trees is really, really complicated. But we don't actually need to understand all of that to understand the opportunity and the challenges this technology has on philanthropy and the work of civil society organizations. Why should we care? As I said, blockchain is just a record-keeping system, which is quite boring when you think about it. It's not revolutionary. It's just a new way of doing record keeping. But when you start to think about record keeping, you start to understand how important it is to society today. Ever since the invention of double entry bookkeeping, so bankers and lawyers will probably understand, and accountants will understand that, the idea of using trustworthy ledgers or trustworthy filing systems is at the heart of our society. Think about your bank records. They tell you how much money you have and how much money you can get. That's all recorded. A bank somewhere has all your records going back to whenever you first opened that account. The land registry tells you who owns the land and the house on the land and what you can do with it, who you can sell it to. The government records that you own a car. Banks, lawyers, institutions, all control things like the electoral roll, which allows us to vote. Record keeping keeps our society alive and makes it work. So the idea of creating and revolutionizing record keeping is quite a fascinating one when you start to think about it. Because what we are doing is putting our trust in banks, in lawyers, in institutions, in the government. And I don't think you need me to tell you that trust in banks, lawyers, politicians is quite low at the moment. It certainly is in the UK. I wonder if it is here. Apologies to any bankers or lawyers in the room. So some reason people think that blockchain is going to be revolutionary is that it's going to create a fundamental transformation in finance, in record keeping, in the way government works, and in the way trusted authorities work and actually contribute to society and help us as individuals carry on our lives. And you start to apply that to philanthropy and civil society, it becomes really, really exciting. The idea is that actually this is a record-keeping system that is controlled and owned by us as individuals. We can see everything. So what are the key features of blockchain and blockchain systems? The first, and I think the most revolutionary one and the exciting one, is transparency and openness. The blockchain is completely transparent and open. I put my money into it. I can see where it goes, who it goes to, how it's used, how much is used, when it's used. I see everything that goes through. My money is unique on the blockchain. Everybody can see it. Now, if you think about that in terms of government paying its education budget out to schools, you can see exactly where that money is going and how it's being used. It brings a huge amount of accountability to a whole system. Assets on the blockchain are unique. They're not fungible. You can't swap an asset for anything else. You see it all the way through. There's reduced costs. Because you're not having to use a lawyer or a bank or any other type of authority or intermediary, you're going direct. You're not having a middleman taking a cut of the money. Now that's really interesting for philanthropy, where you can see your donation going straight to where you want it to go in its entirety without anybody helping that money to move through a system. The other really interesting one is the idea of trust. As I mentioned, trust is at an all-time low with institutions. So the combination of a reduced need on intermediaries, on lawyers and banks and governments, and the idea of increased transparency, many people think that that's going to increase trust. But when you think about it, trust is based on a system of me having to be able to rely that you're going to do something that you've said you would do, or that you own something that you say you own. With blockchain, when you have transparency, trust doesn't need to exist. I can see what's happening. I can see through the whole system. So trust becomes redundant. You don't need that trust, which could make, a lot of times within philanthropy and civil society, relationships are based on trust, and you're having to build that relationship before you actually do anything, before you donate your money or you donate your time. If you know that an organization is going to do what they say they're going to do, and you can hold that organization to account, you can move quicker. You don't need to build that relationship in the same way we do now. Things get really fun, I think, when we start to see how this technology can integrate the digital and the physical worlds. At the moment, most people think about blockchain as Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies, but as I said, it goes much further than that. Anything can be represented on the blockchain. Currently, this is Bitcoin blockchain used as colored coins or bits of currency, which are tiny, tiny bits of currency that are used as tokens for other assets. It's a bit like taking a penny and painting them in various colors to use as poker chips. So you can see how they're all different. But the key thing is that assets don't have to be physical. They can be digital, or they can be completely intangible. The music industry, for example, is really excited about how you can use intellectual property of singers and songwriters and turn that intellectual property into minuscule amounts and look at how you pay people through the blockchain, which takes away things around some of the challenges around piracy and streaming. Sorry. But then we add in artificial intelligence, and it all goes quite crazy, and I get really confused here. So I'll try and keep it simple. And the experts, there are lots of experts over there in the room, they can hopefully help out. So we've seen already that all sorts of assets, whether they're physical, digital, or intangible, can be represented on the blockchain. And this opens up huge opportunities for giving, because we're not going to just talk about giving money or your time. You're going to be able to donate a whole new range of different things. So you could donate your copyright or your intellectual property in hugely different ways. The blockchain also offers a way of monetizing many assets by making micropayments feasible. That copyright, how do you break it down and donate elements of your copyright so other people can benefit from your copyright, from stream music, from books on Kindle or iBooks. So you have micro donations that are going to be possible. And this is where we can bring in the sharing economy. We know about Uber and Airbnb, but we're at the beginning here, and it's going to get much, much bigger. The idea of a growing network of physical devices with sensors, internet access, some artificial intelligence, which are able to collect data on us and everything else around it, exchange information and interact with each other. So what am I talking about here? I'm talking about your refrigerator in your kitchen that understands what food you have in your fridge, when it's going to go off, it's past its sell-by date, or you're running low on milk, and it talks to your supermarket and puts your grocery order in for you. You don't even need to do anything. But interestingly, your fridge is talking to your toilet, which is analyzing your health. And the toilet is talking to your pharmacy or your doctor to make sure you've got the right things in place and all the medicines that you need. Everything is becoming connected through the use of artificial intelligence. Now, one reason people are really excited about blockchain and artificial intelligence coming together is because they think it could provide a new infrastructure of this Internet of Things and actually make it the Internet of everything. All smart objects could become blockchain entities. And they wouldn't just be able to interact with each other, they'll be able to interact with us as individuals, organizations, assets, all different types of things. We get a whole new type of society and an ecosystem being created. One interesting thing here is what happens to the idea of ownership. Who owns what? This is where things start to really change. Smart objects can easily be recorded on the blockchain, and the systems for who owns it, or who we say owns it, becomes automated. Payments become automated. And this is turbocharging the sharing economy as we see it today, and we could see the death of ownership. So one example could be self-driving cars. What happens when we start to properly see volume of self-driving cars on our streets? I don't need to own a car. I go into a car that's sitting there on my street, and if it's there and available, I get in, I go where I want. It finishes at my office, and somebody else gets into it and takes it where they want. I pay just for the usage of my time to go into the car, but we have lots of cars sitting around that we all use. We don't own them. It could be the same for property in the future. Now, how do you use that in philanthropy, or how do civil societies use that? This is where it could get really interesting. So take the car, the self-driving car example. Sometimes it's not going to be doing anything. It's going to be sitting there. It's going to be able, through artificial intelligence, to assess that it is doing nothing and understand that it could be doing something. So could it drive itself to the old lady down the end of the road and help her do her shopping? Could a smart property that's empty for a week understand that it is empty and connect with a homeless charity and offer the space for free to homeless people? This is where things become philanthropists. We pay as individuals for our way to use them, but the spare capacity when it's not being used becomes something that society can use for free or is being donated for free. This is where it could get really exciting, and it's not that far off. We see self-driving cars are becoming a reality quite soon. But what are the opportunities, other opportunities? We've talked about how trust can come through here, transparency, well, trust is no longer needed. There's complete transparency in the system. We know how much money is being donated, we know where it goes, what it's used for, how it's used, when it's used. If there's anything left over, it's actually not given, it's still held back. The costs of philanthropy are down. There's no need for exchange rates for international donations because we're using one type of currency. It's the end of the banks and the lawyers and all the other intermediaries. That's really exciting. Donors are connected to beneficiaries in completely new ways. That we see the donation going to where we want it to go. We're going back to the future, where I walk down the street and there's a homeless person there and I give them 10 real. This is what we're doing, but I can give 10 real to somebody on the other side of the world and I can see exactly how they use it. And they become accountable to me for the way they use that money as well, and I become accountable to them to give them the money that they have used and I've said I would commit. And we're going to see completely new ways of giving things that aren't money. And that's what's really exciting. Your washing machine could be going into business and donating some form of asset to somebody else. But there are some real challenges here. Oh, I'm going backwards, sorry. There are some big challenges here that I think we do really need to consider. Charities are sometimes that middleman. It's not just the banks and the lawyers. We can say goodbye to them quite happily. But civil society organizations, philanthropy, community foundations, these are intermediaries. What happens when we go past them? We don't use them. Or we want to go work with them, but we want to focus on 100% of our donation going to the project that they're funding. What happens to that organization's overhead, their administrative costs? We're seeing more pressure already on civil society organizations to reduce their overhead costs. This could just lead to that even happening even more. Could we see this actually being the end of civil society organizations? Transparency is a fantastic thing. Transparency is an amazing thing that we should all be working towards. But sometimes transparency isn't great, especially for civil society organizations. If you are a human rights organization in Russia, or you're an organization working on LGBT rights in Uganda, you don't want to be that transparent. You don't want the government to know exactly what you're doing and who you're working with. Transparency could put really good people or very vulnerable people at real risk. Cryptocurrency, Bitcoin and others, I mean, they're currently the choice of, currency of choice for criminals and terrorists because they can be anonymous behind it. The money, the Bitcoin itself is completely transparent, but the originator can be anonymous if they want. And that presents a huge problem for civil society organizations who need to know who their donors are, who they're working with, and why they want to be donating that money. And do we want, fundamentally, more philosophically, do we want artificial intelligence, our washing machine or our fridge, telling us or deciding for us how our donations should be used? Or do we want to keep it something that's personal to us? The other big but is the unknown. As with all technology, we see how it can be a great thing. Blockchain technology might not just be about finding new opportunities for NGOs and philanthropists to address old problems. It may in fact create new problems. We've seen how the internet, the rise of the internet, which has done so much good in connecting people, has also brought about new challenges, whether that's access to the internet as a human right or digital exclusion. Online bullying is becoming a huge thing. We've seen fake news all coming through. We've seen how artificial intelligence and social media can impact our lives in ways that we never thought it was. So the big but is, how do we ensure that we don't get this as we look at the benefits, or we don't forget that this is the negative that can happen when we talk about the benefits of technology. Thank you.